A $2,000 drone is now doing a job that once required missiles worth millions, and that shift is already changing the balance in the skies over Ukraine. In just 1 month, thousands of Russian UAVs were launched toward Ukrainian cities and infrastructure, part of a wider effort to drain Kyiv's air defense and force it into a costly fight it cannot sustain forever. At first, the logic seemed simple. Cheap drones attack, expensive systems respond. Over time, the defender runs out of resources. But that logic is starting to break, because Ukraine is no longer relying only on high-cost systems to protect its airspace. Instead, it is moving toward a new approach that is faster, cheaper, and built to scale under constant pressure. At the center of this shift is an unexpected partnership between Ukraine and Japan, and a new type of interceptor drone that is already being tested close to the front line. The risk is no longer just about how many drones Russia can launch. It is about whether the entire model of modern air defense can survive in a war where low-cost attacks happen every night. Stay with us, as Ukraine may be turning Russia's own strategy against itself, and that could mean a lot for future wars. But one question remains. If a low-cost system can stop large-scale attacks, what happens when this model spreads far beyond Ukraine? The turning point in this story begins not on the battlefield, but in a partnership that is quietly reshaping how that battlefield is supplied, tested, and adapted under pressure. Ukraine has expanded its defense cooperation with Japan through a strategic investment from Terra Drone into Amazing Drones, marking a moment where foreign involvement moves beyond support and into direct participation in wartime production. This is not happening far from danger. It is unfolding close to active combat zones, where new systems are not only built, but also quickly pushed into real operations and adjusted based on immediate results. The sequence behind this cooperation reveals how different it is from traditional models. The CEO of Terra Drone has made repeated visits to Ukraine, not for symbolic meetings, but to observe how systems perform under real fire and how quickly they must change to survive. Instead of waiting for long development cycles, both sides are working inside a loop where feedback comes directly from the front, and changes are made in days rather than years. That process becomes visible when a new drone system is tested. Operators report signal loss, control delay, or targeting limits during an active mission, and engineers adjust the design almost immediately before sending it back into the same environment. Each return to the battlefield is not just deployment. It is another stage of development, shaped by contact with the enemy rather than theory. Japan's role in this system is not limited to funding. It brings industrial experience, supply chain coordination, and the ability to scale production beyond what a war economy alone can support. Ukraine, in contrast, provides something that cannot be built in laboratories. It offers continuous exposure to combat conditions, where every weakness is quickly revealed and every improvement is tested under pressure. This combination creates a different kind of output. It is not about producing perfect systems. It is about producing systems that can survive their first mission, learn from it, and return stronger in the next. At the same time, Japan's strategic posture is shifting in response to growing threats in its own region. Concerns about China's military activity, North Korea's missile program, and Russia's presence in the Pacific have pushed Tokyo to rethink its limits. Defense spending has reached record levels, and cooperation with Ukraine provides a direct way to learn from a battlefield where drone warfare is evolving faster than anywhere else. This is why the partnership matters beyond a single product. It shows how countries are beginning to connect their capabilities in real time, linking industrial strength with combat experience to produce results neither side could achieve alone. What emerges is not a simple transfer of technology. It is a shared system of adaptation, where ideas move quickly from one side to the other and return as practical solutions under fire. That shift changes the meaning of cooperation in war. It is no longer about sending equipment from a safe distance. It is about entering the cycle of development itself, where success depends on speed, flexibility, and the ability to respond before the situation changes again. If more countries begin to join this kind of direct collaboration, where technology is built and tested inside active conflict, could the structure of war itself begin to look less like isolated battles and more like a connected global network? The shift becomes visible in the air, where interception is no longer defined by missiles rising from the ground, but by fast-moving machines hunting other machines before they reach their targets. Terra A1 was built for this exact role, not as a general drone, but as a dedicated interceptor designed to chase and destroy incoming threats, like Shahed-type UAVs. Its speed reaches around 300 kilometers per hour, which allows it to close distance quickly and catch targets that were once difficult to stop without expensive systems. This difference in speed changes how engagements unfold. A wave of incoming drones no longer guarantees impact because something faster is already moving to meet it. The sequence often begins before the target even reaches defended airspace. Russian UAVs approach in groups, flying low and steady, using simple paths that are meant to overwhelm defenses through numbers rather than complexity. From the ground, the sky may appear quiet. There is no immediate explosion, no visible launch. Then, a response begins that is much harder to detect. Interceptor drones lift off and accelerate quickly, guided toward incoming objects that are already tracked by sensors and observers. Instead of waiting for the threat to arrive, the engagement moves outward. The point of contact shifts away from cities and infrastructure and into open air where interception can happen earlier. As the distance closes, the difference in design becomes clear. Terra A1 uses an electric motor, which reduces noise and heat signature. This allows it to approach without drawing attention, especially against targets that rely on simple navigation and limited awareness. The moment of interception is not always dramatic. It can happen in seconds, with one drone aligning behind another, closing the gap, and striking before the target can adjust its path. In many cases, the attacking UAV never reaches its intended destination. It is removed from the sequence before it becomes a threat on the ground. This creates a new pattern in how air defense is applied. Instead of reacting at the last moment, the system now acts earlier, extending the defensive line into the airspace itself. The battlefield above becomes active, not as a space where weapons pass through, but as a zone where continuous pursuit takes place. Each interception reduces pressure on ground-based systems, allowing them to focus on more complex threats while simpler targets are handled by faster and cheaper platforms. This also changes how waves of attacks are managed. A large group of incoming drones no longer forces an immediate heavy response. Instead, it triggers multiple smaller engagements, where interceptors are sent out to break the formation and reduce the number of threats before they can concentrate. What matters here is not only the destruction of targets, but the disruption of the attack pattern itself. Once the first drones are intercepted, spacing between the rest begins to change. Timing becomes less predictable, and coordination weakens. That disruption can be as important as the physical damage, because it reduces the effectiveness of the entire wave. This is where the deeper shift appears. The sky is no longer just a path for incoming threats. It has become a contested space where control is decided through movement, speed, and timing. Drone against drone replaces missile against drone, and the logic of interception becomes more flexible and more scalable at the same time. If drones can now hunt other drones before they ever reach their targets, is air combat entering a phase where traditional defenses are no longer the first line of protection, but only the last? The balance of this fight is no longer decided only by firepower, but by how each side spends its resources under constant pressure. For a long time, Russian strategy has relied on a simple logic. Send large numbers of cheap drones toward defended areas, force Ukraine to respond with expensive air defense missiles, and slowly drain those systems over time. On paper, this approach creates pressure without requiring precision. A swarm does not need to be perfect if the goal is to exhaust the defender. The sequence often begins at night. Dozens of UAVs enter from different directions, flying at low altitude and steady speed. Some carry explosives, while others act as decoys, designed to confuse tracking systems and trigger unnecessary responses. From the ground, each incoming signal demands attention. Every radar contact becomes a decision point, and every decision carries a cost. If a missile is launched, the target may be destroyed, but the price of that action is measured in hundreds of thousands or even millions. If no response is made, the risk shifts to infrastructure, supply lines, or civilian areas. This is where the pressure builds. It is not just about stopping one drone, but about surviving a pattern that repeats night after night. Ukraine's response begins by changing that equation at the moment of interception. Instead of relying only on high-cost systems, interceptor drones are now sent forward to meet incoming threats before they reach defended zones. The engagement happens earlier and at a fraction of the cost. When a low-cost interceptor removes an incoming UAV, the result is not only a tactical success, but also a shift in the economic balance of the exchange. Each interception now costs far less than the target it destroys, and far less than the missile that would have been used before. As this pattern repeats, the effect begins to scale. Russian drones continue to arrive in large numbers, but the expected outcome changes. Instead of forcing heavy expenditure on each contact, they are met by systems that can be deployed more frequently without the same financial strain. The pressure that once moved in one direction starts to reverse. Now, sending more drones does not automatically increase advantage. It can increase losses without achieving the intended result. The battlefield sequence reflects this shift. A wave approaches, interceptors launch, multiple engagements happen in parallel, and the number of threats is reduced before reaching critical targets. What once required a limited and expensive response becomes a distributed and repeatable action. This allows defensive operations to continue over longer periods without the same risk of depletion. The deeper impact appears over time. Sustained attacks depend on maintaining pressure, but that pressure loses strength when each attempt becomes less effective and less costly to counter. The attacking side must either increase volume further or accept reduced impact. Both choices carry consequences. Increasing volume raises logistical demands, while reduced impact weakens the purpose of the operation. If one side can intercept repeatedly at low cost, while the other must produce and launch continuously to maintain pressure, the balance begins to shift over time. This does not end the threat, but it changes how that threat is managed and how effective it remains. If the cost of defense drops while the cost of attack stays the same, does that mean expensive weapons are no longer the center of modern war? Or are they becoming tools that must now share the battlefield with something far more scalable? The tempo of this war is now being driven by volume, as Russia increases the scale and frequency of its drone swarm attacks across multiple sectors. Each wave does not arrive as a single line. It comes in layers, from different directions, at different altitudes, and often at different speeds, creating a moving pressure that is difficult to track in one view. Some drones carry explosives and head directly toward infrastructure targets, while others are sent ahead or alongside as decoys, forcing defenders to react before the real threat is fully understood. The sequence often begins quietly. Radar picks up scattered signals, not a single mass. Then more contacts appear, spreading across the map, forming a pattern that suggests a coordinated push rather than an isolated strike. As the swarm moves closer, the pressure builds. Each incoming object must be identified, tracked, and assigned a response within a limited window. At the same time, faster variants begin to appear inside the same wave. These drones reduce reaction time and force quicker decisions, increasing the chance of mistakes under stress. The attack does not depend on precision alone. It depends on forcing the defense to stretch across too many points at once. In some engagements, drones approach from the north and east, while another group enters from a lower altitude along a different path. This creates overlapping threats that are not easy to prioritize. A system focused on one direction may miss another until it is too late. The goal is not only to hit targets, but to overload the process that decides how to respond. When this pattern repeats over several nights, the effect becomes cumulative. Defensive units must stay active for longer periods, tracking more objects, making more decisions, and managing resources under constant pressure. Fatigue begins to matter, not only for operators but for the system as a whole. This is where Ukraine's response becomes visible in how the engagement unfolds. Instead of matching volume with expensive interceptors, more interceptor drones are deployed into the same airspace, creating a forward layer that meets the swarm before it reaches deeper targets. This turns the engagement into a contest between scale and adaptation. Russia increases numbers to maintain pressure, while Ukraine increases interception capacity to absorb and reduce that pressure over time. Neither side stops. One side sends more, the other responds faster. The battle no longer depends on a single decisive moment. It becomes a continuous exchange where advantage shifts with each wave. That balance creates a new kind of battlefield rhythm, where both sides operate in cycles rather than single engagements. And that leads to a central question. If both sides rely on large numbers to shape the fight, but only one side can adapt faster to each new wave, then who truly controls the pace of the battle as this cycle continues? The next phase of this conflict is no longer defined by individual weapons, but by how systems are connected, automated, and sustained under constant pressure. As drone attacks increase in scale and frequency, manual control alone is no longer enough to manage the pace of incoming threats. Operators can track targets, but when hundreds of objects appear within a short time window, the delay between detection and response becomes a critical weakness. This is where automation begins to take over key parts of the process. Instead of waiting for human input at every step, many interceptor systems are being designed to detect, track, and engage targets with minimal delay. The sequence changes from reaction to anticipation. A radar or sensor identifies movement, the system assigns priority, and an interceptor is launched before the target reaches a critical zone. This reduces the gap between observation and action, which is often where attacks succeed. At the same time, production itself has adapted to match the speed of the battlefield. Large factories are no longer the center of output. Smaller, dispersed facilities now handle assembly, testing, and deployment across multiple locations. This creates a network that is harder to disrupt. If one site is targeted, others continue operating, and the overall flow of equipment does not stop. The process becomes less visible and more resilient, allowing continuous supply even under long-range strikes. On the battlefield, this approach connects directly to how defense is structured. Instead of relying on a single layer of protection, multiple layers are placed at different altitudes and ranges. High-altitude threats are handled by long-range systems that track and engage targets early. Mid-level threats are intercepted by mobile systems designed to respond quickly across changing positions. Closer to the ground, short-range platforms and interceptor drones take over, dealing with targets that slip through the upper layers. This creates a sequence where each layer reduces the number of incoming threats before they reach the next. An incoming wave is first detected at distance, then partially reduced, then broken further as it moves closer, until only a fraction remains near the final line of defense. The engagement becomes a process rather than a single event. Each system supports the others, sharing information and extending coverage across a wider area. By the time an attack is prepared against a known position, that position may no longer be active. This forces the attacking side to work with outdated information, reducing accuracy and effectiveness. The result is a defense that is not only layered, but also constantly shifting. What makes this approach more effective is not just the presence of advanced equipment, but how each element is linked into a larger network. Data moves between sensors, interceptors, and command units, allowing faster decisions and more coordinated responses. The battlefield becomes less about individual strength and more about how well the entire network performs under pressure. What is happening in the skies over Ukraine is no longer just a clash between drones and air defense systems. It is a warning that the rules of war are being rewritten in real time. A system that once depended on expensive missiles is now being challenged by machines that cost a fraction, move faster to deploy, and can be produced at scale. Ukraine is no longer trying to match every attack with equal firepower. It is changing how the fight is sustained, reducing cost, increasing speed, and turning defense into a system that can keep operating under constant pressure. At the same time, partnerships with countries like Japan and support from allies such as the United Kingdom are building something larger than a single battlefield solution. They are creating a network where innovation, production, and combat experience are connected and evolving together. If low-cost systems can stop large-scale attacks, and if automation continues to reduce the role of human operators, then the balance of power may shift toward those who can adapt faster rather than those who spend more. But this shift is still unfolding. Will this model expand and reshape conflicts around the world? Or will new limits appear before it fully replaces traditional systems? If this breakdown helped you understand what is really happening behind the headlines, like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more in-depth battlefield analysis.